Okay, welcome back. Another day, another video. So continuing on with this project to basically document everything end to end in terms of building a new startup and obviously starting with the user authentication, registration, login, etc. So if you haven't watched the first video, I highly recommend that you go and do that. Basically, we leveraged ChatGPT to build a much more kind of robust registration and login functionality than just, kind of what I typically see people doing with ChatGPT. There is a second video if you want to go and watch around 2.5 to 3 hours of me absolutely going crazy trying to debug all of the issues that we had with the test setup. I recommend you go and watch that, although it isn't necessarily the most exciting of videos. But yeah, look, as I mentioned in the first video, I'm documenting every step of the way, like literally everything that I do, I'm recording. So in today's video, I want to bring across what we were looking at with some of the points we still had to consider. We do need to ask ChatGPT about the functionality in Express.js 5 for error handling. We haven't got the markdown files yet, though, for explaining all of the code. And I think, again, I've got no idea who's going to be watching these videos, but on the basis of the idea that you're probably not watching this if you're an experienced developer. And if you are an experienced developer, you're probably noticing some things that maybe I'm not doing 100% correctly, or, for example, in yesterday's video, I probably could have troubleshooted or solved a lot of the problems easier just manually rather than using ChatGPT, especially if I was more experienced with Jest, which is a testing library. So what I want to actually do is I want to start by adding some additional documentation to our code base to help explain it and help make sense. So I was just opening up Claude and I noticed that they have this new button here called Introducing Projects, and it says projects help you organize your work and leverage knowledge across multiple conversations. Upload docs, code, and files to create themed collections that Claude can reference again and again. This sounds very exciting. So it will better understand the context and background for your chat. So you can define custom projects and obviously collaboration. We're not collaborating with anyone, but this sounds really cool. So let's try an example project. Here's an example that also doubles as a how-to guide. How can Claude help you today? I just want to start a new project. All projects. Create project. Okay, cool. We will call this user auth Node.js backend, and we'll create our project. Then what I want to do is no knowledge added yet. Okay, set up custom instruct, add content, upload from device. Okay, what I'll do is, don't want everyone to see every single file. Maybe me and my family save on my computer. I'm wondering if we can just drag. If I drag the whole project folder on, it's going to include all of the node module stuff. So I don't necessarily want to do that, but I'm wondering if I drag on everything except node modules. One or more files have failed to upload. Please try again. Okay. Maybe. Okay, you can't upload folders. You have to upload individual files. 2% capacity used. Okay, this is pretty good. So I'm just going to quickly drag and drop all of the functionality that we have, all of the files. Models, registration, routes, tests, utils, app.js, db.js, jest.package, and that should then know. I think that should then have everything pretty much about the project. So let's just test it. Can you review the files and explain your understanding of the project? This project is a robust backend authentication system built using Node.js, Express, and MongoDB. All right, this is great. The system provides a solid foundation for building secure, scalable web applications with user authentication capabilities. So it's done what we wanted it to. All right, now what we can do is I'll give it some more context. So how do we go? Add context. I was wondering if I can tell it how my folder structure is set up. I guess you can, but I might just tell it in the chat. My folder structure is set up in a way that all of the files for specific functionality are within one folder. For example, for our registration functionality, there is a folder called registration. Within that folder is the controllers, services, routes, and tests for the registration functionality. What I now want you to do is provide me with a markdown file that provides a detailed overview of what the registration functionality achieves. Explain all core functions required to achieve the complete registration functionality, and explain how functionality in these files interacts with other functions, in particular our middleware and utils, which are used globally across the application. I want you to write this file in a way that someone who is new to coding would be able to read it and understand how this code works. Please provide the file in Markdown format. Let's see. It's funny, it's like talking to you. If you're new to coding, don't worry. We'll break down everything. What does registration do? Okay, it's a little bit simplistic. I wanted it to be a little bit more, think of routes. Okay. Yeah, that's, okay. That's a little bit too simplistic. Okay. Okay, sorry. That was a little bit too simplistic. Change your approach to document and explain the functionality as if we were experienced developers. Okay, this is what we're after. Registration functionality is implemented using a layered architecture following the principles of separation of concerns. The key components are routes, controllers, service, and models. The structure facilitates maintainability, testability, and scalability of the code base. Detailed components. We've got our routes, utilizes express validator for input validation, implements custom validation for password confirmation, applies validate requests middleware for centralized error handling and validation of errors. Okay. And then it's got our controller, our service. This is great. And models. Geez, this is very detailed. Even goes into our testing strategy, potential improvements. Add support for social authentication, enhance password policy, implement CAPTCHA or similar mechanism, add support for multi-factor authentication. Okay, this is great. So what I want to do is copy this and add it. I don't know what we'll call it, overview. And then let me just go into registration. I saved it in the wrong place. Sorry, I will bring it back to the screen in just a second. Okay. Actually, maybe can you? I want to just be able to like open it really easily. Is the best. I've never done this before, like kind of add this level. Yeah, that's what I did. Why is it? Okay. Didn't really do what I wanted it to do beforehand with the full okay. Please convert the entire document into a okay, this is what I wanted. I really like that it gave us potential improvements. I think that's so good. Save. Okay, fantastic. There's our file in Markdown format when you open it. It is opening it in Notepad for now, but that's fine if you click it from the file thing. But if you view it in, I'll de-split my window. If you view it in the Codebase itself, you've got all of the information, which is great. So yeah, just to run through it and explain it from my point of view again, if you're an experienced developer, you're going to know all of this, but I'll do my best to explain my interpretation and in a little bit more of a layman's term. I'm probably most familiar with Node.js and Express out of all of the different development work that I've done, probably followed by React. As I said, I don't have a lot of experience with Jest, which I mentioned yesterday. So basically, what happens is we've obviously set up our server, and we'll probably write some documentation and explain that. But once you've done all of that, we then have our route, which is /register. When someone hits that, we're passing to our backend their email, their password, confirming their password, and the company name. This is validating, doing some validation within the route itself to ensure that the password is a certain number of characters and that the password matches the confirmed password. So if your password is ABC123 and then you do your confirmed password as ABC8910, it obviously would work. Now, once a user, this is only the first part of the register user functionality. It's basically just defining the endpoint. The endpoint is then picked up by our controller. I'm trying to think of like a layman's term of just describing what a controller is. I think the best way of thinking about it, it's orchestrating the functionality that occurs afterwards. So it's pulling the email, password, confirmed password, and company name from the request.body because this is the request, which is hitting our API endpoint. You get the request body, and we're extrapolating, that's why it's in the curly brackets, from the request.body, the email, the password, confirmed password, company name. If you don't do that, if you just get request.body, you get a whole heap of other stuff too. And that's not really relevant for what we need at this point in time. There is some additional check here again. Password does not equal confirmed password, so there's some duplication of code. And then if that password doesn't equal confirmed password, the response that we get back from our API call is the status 400, which means it failed. And then we're appending to that response some JSON, which is an object which includes the field of success as false and a message that says passwords do not match. Assuming the passwords are correct, what we then do is we call our registration service file, in particular the registration user functionality. Now, this registration user functionality needs our email, password, and company name. It doesn't need the confirm password because we've already done the checks there. So if we'll come back to this. So we skip down to our registration service and we can see the register user function. There's our email, password, company name. Now here what we do is we do more of the business logic. So first of all, we check if they're an existing user. So we await user.findOne. Find1 comes from Mongoose and is a way of interacting with our database. So we're looking at our collection of users to find one user that has the same email. If they have the same email, then they are an existing user, right? So if existing user, then we want to throw an error that says this email already exists, right? Because we can't have two different users with the same email address. If that's not the case, so if the email is unique, we create our company. So let company await company.create. That's another one of our models, right? We've got the user model, we've got the company model, and as a result, they're collections in our MongoDB database. And we're creating a company and with the name company name. Then we hash our password. So this is to encrypt our password using bcrypt. It's just a hashing algorithm. And then once we've got our encrypted password, what we can do is we can now create our user. So we create our user with obviously their email, which we know is unique, their password, which has been hashed, and the company being the company ID is the reference field. And we assign them the role of admin. Now, what I am interested in checking though is that when we call user.create, I think in our user model, we were already hashing the passwords before saving. So let's just ask Claude that. I noticed in our registration service for creating a user, we are hashing the password. But in our user model, we also hash the password. I believe this is duplication of effort and could cause issues. Okay. Yep. So, okay. That was a good catch. So we'll go to our registration service and we're going to get rid of this. So we're not going to hash the password. And then because of that, we're just going to pass in the normal password. And then it's not used anywhere else, so that should work. All right. And then what we'll do is, I took the approach of updating our registration service to remove the hashing that occurred there. Can you now update the markdown file explaining the registration functionality with this adjustment? Alright, so we'll get that and we'll continue on our way. So this is going to change obviously. And then when a user is registered, obviously we need to keep them authenticated. So that's what's happening here with the token. I'm not too familiar with the refresh token, so we'll get Claude, I was going to say ChatGPT, to explain that in a little bit more detail. And then once the user has been registered, if we go back to our controller, so we've called our registration service, which provides the result back to this piece of functionality. And then given that, we can now send back a response with a 201, which is a positive, again with JSON, and we're passing success true. We're passing back the user. So now because it's result, it's not like their email, it's result.something. So you could do like result.email, but we're getting result.user, which would be the user ID, result.token, and result.refresh token. So there's no need to pass back the hash password or anything like that. And then we also have this catch block here where if there's an error for whatever reason in this piece of code, this try, it throws a new error of app error, and it passes in the error.status code and this message. So that explains the registration functionality. If we go back to Claude, we should have our updated file. Fantastic. Has it still got those key points, potential improvements? Awesome. So we're going to copy that content and we're going to go over here and paste this in here and save that. Oh no, I wanted the whole file. God damn it. It changed. No changes. Please provide the whole file. Don't actually. Okay, no changes in this section. No. Okay. Please provide the whole MD file. Don't just tell him where there changes. All right. We'll get this. Thank you. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move on to our login functionality. And we will get Claude to provide the same documentation. I think it's a good opportunity to identify if there's any errors as well. So that's I think it's a good process to go through this, basically. Okay, fantastic. Now, we are going to say, great work. Can you please now provide the same file describing of the login functionality? Please keep same format. I'm a little bit concerned that now that we've changed our registration service slightly, we might now have some of these tests fail. I'm gonna run the test, and we'll see. If there are issues, we're not going to fix it now. We'll come back to it, but this is kind of one of the advantages of using tests. It can show up if anything else may have broken. If something does break, it could just be in the test itself. But no, everything passed. It's fantastic. Alrighty. So let's go to our. We'll get this login file, and we're going to save that. Obviously in our login. So we will do login, new file, overview.md. And we'll copy this, paste this. I really like that it's doing these recommendations. Like we can really take this stuff and build like a really robust application. All right, so I won't explain all this in like super complex, super detailed thing again. There's a lot of commonality, obviously, between the registration and the login. We're hitting our endpoint, doing some validation. We have separate. That's interesting. Why the? Okay, that's weird. Login routes. Why is it doing? Oh, okay. Yeah, in our routes. Oh, okay, it's passing in an array of. That's weird. I don't know why it does that. Yeah, I didn't notice that. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm just getting. It just threw me because obviously it's doing the validation again, just within this route. Might ask Claude for its view on that. Anyway, we'll come back to that. And then we've got our controller, which is coordinating all of the functionality. We're getting again our email and password off the rec.body. We pass the. We then call our authenticate user service or login service, which is going to be down here. And then basically it checks if we've got a user, it populates their company. If there's no user, we throw an error saying you've got a wrong email or password. If there is a user, we compare the hashed password with the password they passed in with the hashed password, which is on user.password. And we assign them a new token to stay logged in. And token, in. We create the token here, we assign a token. and then we're using our token model to save the refresh token to that model which is associated with the user. We return our user, which takes us all the way back up here to our login functionality, where we can then pass in or call, send back a response which is positive, with the data being the result, which is all of the user details. So that's all looking good. What I'm interested in seeing is security considerations, testing strategy, implement. So some ideas: implement multi-factor authentication, add OAuth support 2.0 for social login. That could be a good idea. Implement IP-based suspicious activity detection, capture, password strength requirements. We probably should do that, and support for session management across multiple devices. That's something I've never done either. But what I am interested in asking Claude is saying, I am not too familiar with refresh tokens. Can you explain how they work and the logic of storing a refresh token in the database, given we have a separate token model? Okay, refresh tokens are a key component in modern authentication systems, especially those using JSON Web Tokens. They allow users to remain authenticated for longer periods without constantly having to re-enter their credentials. Interesting. When a user logs in, they receive two tokens: an access token, which is short-lived, 15 minutes, and a refresh token, which can be longer, 7 days, say. The client includes the access token in the authorization header for API requests. That's so that once you're logged in, say you have another API endpoint to get, say it's a task management tool, to get all your notes. Well, obviously you want to make sure you're authenticated, so you pass the token into that GET request for that API, so that it returns obviously your notes, and then that way no one else can get them. So validates this token. Yep, that makes sense. So instead of asking the user to, when the access token expires, the client can't make authenticated request. Instead of asking the user to log in again, the client sends a refresh token to a specific endpoint. If the refresh token is valid, the server issues a new access token and sometimes a new refresh token. Okay. Why are they stored in the database? Obviously, you need to have them somewhere. Awesome. That's really handy. Thank you. Thank you. That was helpful. Helpful. What I did also want to ask is, I noticed in our routes, we're also doing some level of validation. I noticed in our login route file, we do some validation, specifically validation of email password here. Is this best practice? I'm not too sure. Okay, there's some interesting. It does say to keep it. Yeah, see, so that's why I was a little bit confused, because I've never done any level of validation here, but basically it's saying like you can do some validation at this level, so that you then don't progress further into your controller, etc. Obviously it leads to some duplication, but we can create a separate validate login. Okay. I am wondering. We also have Express Validator. Where is Express Validator used? See, so Express Validator is using the routes file, but then we're not using it. we are. Maybe we are. Did I miss that? Oh my god. Oh, we are using it already. Validate request from validate request. Validate request uses express validator. Okay. My confusion, that's what we're doing. Okay, fantastic. So the usage of express validator in your routes file combined with the custom validate request middleware provides robust first line defense against invalid or malicious input. So that's really good to know that we're doing that. Alrighty. So we've described our the two kind of the login functionality. We've described the registration functionality. I'm going to ask it to cover off on our middleware next, because I think that would be worthwhile to look at. Thank you. That was helpful. Can you now provide me with another markdown file that describes the functionality of all of our middleware and how it interacts with our code? Please keep the same format. So obviously AI can do a better job of explaining middleware than I can, because you might be thinking, hey, there's like utils and there's middleware. Seems like they're somewhat similar because they're used across multiple aspects of the application. My explanation on the difference would be like middleware is something that sits in between two functions or two things that you're doing in your application. So for example, our validate request sits between the route file and the controller file, right? The sanitization sits between like a file that is saving something to our database and the database itself. That's how I think of it. Whereas like a util is a reusable piece of code that might be called in multiple different parts of the application, but like technically, I guess if you got rid of the util and obviously changed the code, everything would still work as you'd expect it to. It's just kind of a way of extrapolating out common code that's needed in lots of different locations. I hope that makes sense. I guess the main thing is, yeah, middleware, it's as the name sounds, it sits in the middle of something. Again, layman's understanding, well, not layman, but like simplistic explanation. All right, middleware functionality overview. Let's copy this. Let's go back to our file. Let's go into our middleware and we'll go overview.md and we'll paste this in here. Alrighty. Middleware functions, crucial part of our Express.js application. They have access to the request and response objects and the next middleware function in the application's request response file. So I can sit in the middle, right? And I think this is important. They can call another middleware function. So it could be like middleware outcome. All right, validate request.js. This centralizes handling of validation errors from Express Validator, sends a bad request if the validation fails. And this is used in conjunction with express.validator, express-validator in our route files. That's what we just learned. Authentication middleware. So this verifies the presence or validity of the JWT tokens in the request header. So when we make a request to our server, in the header is our token. This functionality decodes the token, attaches it to the user information, and makes sure that the user has the permissions to access their information. If not, prevents unauthorized access, right? It's great. Error handling middleware. Centralizes error handling, differentiates between operational errors and programming errors. So operational error is like programming error is like something you didn't intend to happen, right? Like, hey, I've got a bug. An operational error is, something you might want to force an error, or there might be an issue, a time where there is actually an error because of some operation that's performed, right? And then it sends a response. I hope that makes sense. Sanitization middleware. So prevents NoSQL injection attacks by sanitizing data inputs. So it sits before we save any information in our database. And this is to just stop someone, who knows what they're doing, like a hacker. Could write a piece of code or logic. Say you had a text field when you're using that task management application, you allow someone to create a task. In the input field, instead of like putting the task details, they wrote a bit of code that allowed them to extrapolate stuff from your database. Because when they save that code as a note, it gets saved to your database, right? So this basically sanitizes those user inputs to make sure they're all good. Logging middleware. This is logging errors and warnings and stuff. I do want to look at this because I don't think the error logs that we're getting are great. But anyway, and then this explains how it all works, where it sits. All right, implement rate limiting middleware. I think we have rate limiting in our app.js. We did originally rate limit in production, so we do have it. Maybe we extrapolate that out to middleware. Cause, I think again we've got that in our app.js. Caching, we could do that. Implement for detailed API usage logistics for small logging. Awesome, that's fantastic. So we're going to save that. Now we are also going to ask Claude. Awesome, looks great. I don't know why I'm being polite to AI, but I think it helps. Can you please now do the same for our utils folder for the functionality of our utils? It doesn't have the folder structure, so it's not going to know what our utils are, which are app error. I didn't pick up app error here, did it? No, error handler. App error, and I wonder if it knows. It should know. No, it picked up logger. It picked up logger as middleware, not our util. Anyway, all right, we won't do the utils folder. We will say, can you now do the same for functionality of the server.js, app.js, db.js, .env, and lint and prettier config files. Please provide in MD format and keep the same format as before. All right, once we get this, I'll explain it, and then I need to head off because it's getting close to the start of my day. I've got a real job to do. We need to also do our user models. I wanted to explain that. Okay. Awesome. Looks great. Can you now do the same for our models files? Provide an MD format. All right. I want to copy, and we will do overview MD. Paste this. So yeah, all of these functionalities obviously the start of everything that we do, right? So core files, set up and run our Node.js application. Without these, nothing's going to work. And also some configuration files. So this is our server.js. This calls our configures our .mv, which is where we keep all of our secrets, right? We talked about that previously, bringing in different dependencies. This is starting the server. We've got a different connection for test, and we've got a different connection for now start server. If process.mv equals test, wait, yeah, connect DB. So that's going to be in our DB file, sorry. If else, yeah, so else test environment skipped. Excuse me. Yeah, so if we're not logging in as test, we then do app.listen. No, sorry, my mistake. Start again. If the environment is test, we run this code. If it's not, then we would call start server. And start server is going to be somewhere a little bit later on, which we'll get to. App.js, so this is, I asked Claude to explain like the logic between differentiating between a server and an app.js file, because sometimes a lot of people will do it in one. But here we're bringing in a lot of our middleware, so cause, helmet, rate limiting, Morgan, sanitization middleware. We've obviously got our routes file. This is the entry point for our routes file, so I'll explain that when we get to that. So use production, we set the environment variable to production. Again, they might have some recommendations on how we improve this. This is if it's production, we want to allow the origin to be certain URLs. If it's not, then we allow all of our localhost. If it is not production, we use Morgan because you don't want to log the same kind of stuff to the console if it is production. If it is production, we use our rate limiter. And this is the routes that I was talking about. So this is our entry point for our route. So we don't define all of our routes here in our app.js file, otherwise it would be really long. We have this central file. And then when we had our login routes, register routes, it picks up from there. We've got our health check. We've got some error handling if there's a general 404. Okay. And then here's our database.js file. Connect to database. I'm trying to... I'm a little bit confused with the connect to database. Test. I'll ask it about that because we should have a separate test database and a separate production database. Obviously, at the moment we don't, but we'll get to that. Anyway, this database.js is just where we're extrapolating the connection to our database. Again, probably should have separate ones if it's test. Well, not test actually, like more dev than test, because with our test, if you remember, we're using the in-memory MongoDB so that we don't have to have a separate database when we run our tests. I guess there is a difference between like testing in terms of like user testing and user testing, having a user log in. Obviously, they'd need to create an account and be able to, you know, check out your functionality and that kind of thing. If you're kind of using like a beta or an alpha version of the application versus automated testing. I'm probably confusing you, but I hope that made sense. Here's our .m file, so it explains all of the different secrets that we need. Should never commit to version control. So we haven't done that yet, any form of version control, so we don't need to worry about that. This is our ESLint, configures ESLint for code linting, which ensures code quality and consistency. This is prettier, same thing, but more of like styling and formatting. And then it describes how it all works. So server.js is the entry point, which loads environment variables and initiates the application. db.js establishes our database connection. Express application is configured in app.js and is started by server.js. So there it is, it's explaining it. App.js uses our routes and middleware, and the .m file provides a configuration. Potential improvements. So implement database connection pooling, don't know what that is. Do more comprehensive health checks, we can do that. Implement graceful shutdown and handling, yep, that sounds like a good idea. Consider using a configuration management library for more complex environment setups, not sure, I don't have familiarity with that. And implement automated linting and formatting checks in the CI/CD pipeline. So we can do that later on, so we'll save that. And for now, I just want to go to our models, and we go back to Claude, and we're going to copy this, and we're going to go to here, and we're going to go overview. All right, so we've got our user model. This is the salting, hashing of the password. Implements some email validation as well. This is our company model. So if you recall from the first video, a company can have multiple users, but one user can only be associated with one company. At the moment, the check is done on the company name, so there can only ever be one company. We might want to change that because, as I was talking about previously, the company might be ABC Roofing. You could have an ABC Roofing in like Australia, America, Britain, whatever. Token model. So that's for the refresh token, which everything explained to us before. So here it is, user to company, one to many. So, sorry, many to one. Many users to one company. User to token, one to many. So a user can have multiple tokens for different devices. Interesting. Company model, best practices, potential improvements. Implement a more robust password strength checker. Good. Soft delete. Consider implementing a soft delete mechanism. Yes, good idea. So if a user asks to delete their account, sometimes you have, like when you delete your account, it says, hey, you know, if within 30 days you change your mind, you might want to bring all of that back. Equally, if a user deletes their information and you have like an analytics tool that's kind of looking at usage of your app over time, and you want to retain like how many tasks have been created, if you go and delete all of the tasks the user created, then all of a sudden you lose all of that information. Now, you need to balance this with, hey, what if a user wants to delete all of their information, right, and you aren't allowed to store it anymore? So can you, for example, like replace, like still know that they created tasks or whatever it is in your application, but you extrapolate out all of that personal information? Like maybe you just, I don't know what the best practice is here, but like if someone's got a personal task, like, hey, I need to do X, Y, Z in my company, you just replace it with like task 1. So you still know that they created a task, it still shows up in like your long-term analytics of how many tasks were created, but you don't have any of that personal information. Virtual populate, I have some familiarity with that. Utility methods, we should look into that. Implement more hooks, pre-remove for handle cascading, deletes, updates. Encryption, yes, good idea. And pagination to support models that have a large number of documents. We don't probably need those for the company and the user, but something to keep in mind for next time. So I hope that's provided a little bit more of a robust understanding of how our application's working. I think we've got some great ideas from Claude on where to implement, and we also still need to go back and answer these. So I'll pause the video here and then probably end this video as a bit of an overview and understanding of our app, and then we'll kick off with some more functionality in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.